Everyone is talking about the new highway code changes that are set to go into place from this Saturday, January the 29th, 2022. And personally, I think this is going to cause a lot of confusion, potentially lots of anger and disruption on the roads, and quite frankly, I'm not entirely convinced that they're going to work. Why do I say that? Because in reality, when drivers are turning into junctions, it's going to be incredibly difficult to see, first of all, that people are waiting to cross the roads. But secondly, for vehicles behind them, they may not know why they've suddenly stopped before turning into the junction, and that might cause more collisions. So bear with me to the end of the video and allow me to explain some of these changes so that you can share your views as to whether you think these changes are going to work or not. First of all, I will say that none of these changes are going to detract from the responsibility that is shared by all road users. And that includes pedestrians and cyclists, horse riders, motorcyclists, vehicle drivers, lorry drivers, van drivers. Everybody shares this responsibility to each other and has a common duty of care to each other, to every other road user. However, these changes are looking at introducing a hierarchy of vulnerability and therefore priority between certain road users. Rule H1 is set to define this hierarchy of road users, ultimately from a standpoint of vulnerability and therefore who should have priority. So the objective here is obviously one of safety. So in order of priority, it will be pedestrians, cyclists, horse riders, and then other vehicles. But as I said, and just to restate, every road user has a duty of responsibility to each other when using the roads. So now it's rules H2 and H3 that are causing me some concern, because over the last few weeks I've clipped a few pieces of footage from my vehicle dashcam, which I'm going to follow up in another video because I haven't exported those yet. But those are going to illustrate the difficulty that I think road users are going to have when implementing these new rules. So let me show you an example and you'll see what I mean. And for this example, you're going to see my expert drawings and electric vehicles. So imagine this as a standard carriageway, albeit a little bit of a blip in the road there, but imagine this as a normal road, as a T-junction. And you're going to have vehicles wanting to turn into or out of this junction. So let me just pause for a moment and look at the rules. The proposed rule H2 says at a junction you should give way to pedestrians crossing or waiting to cross a road into which or from which you are turning. So let's look at that on my little diagram here. So let's say, for example, we have a pedestrian, P, waiting to cross the road at this point here, but we've got a vehicle waiting to turn into the road as well. The new rules are going to suggest that this vehicle should stop and wait for this pedestrian to cross the road first, because they are waiting to cross the road. So this pedestrian is then going to have to make the choice when seeing the car as to whether to cross the road or not, or wait for the vehicle to pass first, as most people have always taught their children to stop at the side of the road and wait for vehicles that look like they're going to come across your path to pass first, because obviously it's dangerous. Not to mention that cars will by now be queuing up behind this car wanting to turn left. So now how about when you've got the vehicle on the other side of the road wanting to turn right into this T-junction, but you still have the pedestrian waiting to cross? According to the rules, the car should wait for the pedestrian to cross the road first. Meanwhile, cars will be queuing up behind, wondering why they're not taking the opportunity to turn into the road. How about instead the pedestrian is on the other side of the road waiting to cross the road? Again, the vehicle should wait because the pedestrian looks like they are waiting to cross the road. But now how about if we have two vehicles waiting to turn into this road? One wants to turn right, the other one wants to turn left. But all the while there's a pedestrian waiting to cross the road. Who's going to move first, or is it going to be a standoff and nobody moves first? The other difficulty I think will come out of these new rule changes is the minimum distance to be left between cyclist and vehicle. So at speeds of under 30 miles per hour, there is to be a minimum distance of 1.5 meters between the cyclist and the vehicle when overtaking that cyclist. 1.5 meters, albeit a safe distance, is quite a large distance, which will often mean the vehicle has no choice but to be on the wrong side of the road whilst overtaking, which is going to be very difficult and cause significant tailbacks on very busy roads. And that is just at speeds of under 30 miles per hour. when we get to speeds of over 30 miles per hour, the minimum distance will be 2 meters to overtake a cyclist, which is almost always going to mean that the vehicle overtaking is on the wrong side of the road. So again, when the roads are very busy, doubtless there is going to be significant tailback with other vehicles queuing up behind because the one near the cyclist cannot overtake whilst leaving a 2 meter gap between them. There is also going to be a change to Rule 72, which is going to focus on the road positioning for cyclists. So when riding on the road, there will be 2 basic road positions to adopt, essentially in reverse order: half a meter away from the curb edge, which is where most cyclists will cycle at the moment. But the first position suggested by the new rules is to ride in the center of your lane to make yourself as clearly visible as possible in the following situations. On quiet roads or streets, if a faster vehicle comes up behind you, move to the left and enable them to overtake if you can do so safely. In slower moving traffic, move over to the left if you can do so safely, so that faster vehicles behind you can overtake when the traffic around you starts to flow more freely. At the approach to junctions or road narrowings where it would be unsafe for drivers to overtake you. So in essence, this rule is suggesting that cyclists ride in the center of the lane, but then move over when a faster vehicle comes up behind them, or in slow-moving traffic, move over again, or approaching junctions, move over again. Quite frankly, I think this is going to cause confusion, because riders in the center of the road, then moving over, because faster vehicles come up behind them. Query, is that not going to encourage drivers to drive up quickly behind a cyclist and expect them to move out of the way, which is kind of contrary to the point of these rules, which is providing a hierarchy based on vulnerability, so that somehow the cyclist is higher in this hierarchy and yet has to essentially get out of the way when a faster vehicle comes up behind them. So I'm not entirely convinced that this wording is going to be effective. And as I said with giving way to pedestrians when you're turning into a road because they're waiting to cross, again, I think this is going to cause confusion. I think lots of these are going to cause confusion. Even if everyone knows what the rules are, which an AA survey suggests that 1/3 of people don't know about these changes. But even if people do know these changes, the confusion can come about with what the cyclist is doing, or whether or not the pedestrian is actually going to cross or not, or are they just standing at the side of the road? Which means you're going to have vehicles stopping whilst they're about to turn left into a road, expecting the pedestrian to cross the road, but then let's say they don't. Or let's say the pedestrian doesn't cross the road because they are worried about the vehicle turning in, and so they stand there, the vehicle waits there. Meanwhile, lots of vehicles are queuing up behind. Then let's say, well, the vehicle just turns into the road because the pedestrian doesn't move. But let's say the pedestrian moves at the same time, thinking that they are given priority. Quite frankly, I don't think many pedestrians are going to take that risk and just cross the road and assume that the vehicle is going to give them priority. I just don't think this will happen in great numbers across the country. Maybe you disagree with me. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you were a pedestrian waiting to cross and there was a vehicle waiting to turn into your road, would you cross on the assumption that they are going to give you priority, or would you wait for the vehicle to pass first? As we teach children to wait until cars have gone before you cross the road. Because as the rules suggest, pedestrians are the most vulnerable road user among them all. And as with many things, the lack of communication about these rules and about how and when they're going to apply simply doesn't help matters. So I'm making this video so that you have more thought about it, more knowledge about it, and you can discuss it in the comments, because I think overall, if people discuss this a lot more, it's going to have more effect than it would otherwise. So please do share this with someone that you think needs to hear about it, and thank you for watching.